It's very important that by the end of this year, we can send a very strong signal of our unity to the aggressor and the unity of Ukraine, America, Europe, the entire free world.
But many Republicans want to send a very strong signal to the aggressor that they support the aggressor because Donald Trump supports the aggressor, Vladimir Putin.
Russian loyalists in Moscow celebrated when Republicans voted to block Ukraine aid last week. The host of a Kremlin-run show literally said, and I quote, "Well done, Republicans. That's good for us." If you're being celebrated by Russian propagandists, it might be time to rethink what you're doing. History will judge harshly those who turn their back on freedom's cause. Today, Ukraine's freedom is on the line, but if we don't stop Putin, it'll endanger the freedom of everyone, almost everywhere.
The deeply ignorant and morally empty Republican Speaker of the House explained today why he and other Republicans are blocking aid to Ukraine.
We need a clear articulation of the strategy to allow Ukraine to win.
The United States of America did not ask Winston Churchill what his strategy to win was when Adolf Hitler was relentlessly bombing London. The United States of America helped the British in every way possible with military supplies long before the United States was forced to join the battle in World War II when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. In fact, the United States of America's support of the British resistance to Hitler's aggression was only strengthened by the fear that the British might lose. What Republicans don't know is the moral question of whose side are you on in war is not answered by the answer to the question, who do you think's going to win? Joining us now is Timothy Snyder, professor of history at Yale University. He is the author of The Road to Unfreedom, Russia, Europe, America. Professor Snyder, here is President Zelensky on another trip to Washington. And by the way, it should not go unnoticed that Ukraine is doing well enough, is stable enough in this war posture that the president of Ukraine can leave the country and come to the United States. That wasn't something we thought was going to be possible at the beginning of this war. But here he is, welcomed by the Democrats and essentially rejected by the Republicans.
At the beginning of this war, the American consensus was that Ukraine would be defeated in 3 days. Ukrainians have done a great deal more than anyone could have expected. I think a great deal more than anyone but they themselves expected. And what they have done applies really to us as well. They're doing things for us that we can't do for ourselves. They're holding back a full-scale Russian attack in Europe. They've killed or wounded 90% of the size of the initial Russian armed forces. They've taken back more than half of the territory which Russia took. They've showed China just how hard an offensive operation would be, thereby making it much less likely that there'll be a war in the Pacific. And in general, they've defended the international order. They've done all of this for themselves, of course, to stop the genocidal war, but they've also benefited us hugely. So there is something, touching, but also, as you say, or suggest a bit strange, that not just the president of Ukraine can come, of course he can come, but that he has to ask it all.
The Republicans don't seem to have noticed that Vladimir Putin does not have a strategy to win.
I mean, any historian will tell you that wars are unpredictable. It's not a script that you write. It's not a press release. It's not a soundbite. If you want to win a war, you have to first commit to fighting it. And you have to decide which side you're on. The Russians started this war on the false premise that Ukraine would collapse. And Putin has to keep fighting it because he can't stand the loss of face. He can't take the risk of a neighboring democracy defeating his tyranny. So he'll stay in it. But he believes that his best battlefield is the capital. He knows that he can't defeat the Ukrainians at this point militarily if we continue to assist. And so his bet, and they're quite open about this in Russian propaganda, as President Biden was saying, they're quite open that they think their best hope is that the Americans back down. That's their best hope. In fact, it's their one hope. But if we do back down, we will pay all these things that we're taking for granted, all this security that we're reaping from this, we then lose it.
Let's listen to what President Zelensky said today about negotiating with Russia, as some Republicans want him to do, and give up some territory.
We are talking about human beings. They are being under tortures, they are being raped, and they are being killed. And those voices which offers to give up our territories, they offers as well to give up our people. That's not a matter of territory, that's a matter of lives, of families, of children, of their histories. I don't know whose idea it is, but I have a question to these people if they are ready to give up their children to terrorists. I think no.
Reframing it into asking us to give up people when they've been basically asking them to give up territory is so important today.
When I look at the expressions of some of the Congress people talking about Ukraine, they seem so abstract and so distant to me, like they're just thinking about a map and colors on maps. But we're talking about millions of people, tens or hundreds of thousands of children who've been kidnapped, untold numbers of women who have been raped, unfortunately a huge number of civilians, including civilian local leaders, murdered in a war which Russia itself announces over and over again to be genocidal. We like to think of ourselves as the people who would act to stop that sort of crime. And in this case, in order to act, all we have to do is support people who are perfectly capable of defending themselves. On the issue of negotiation, the Russians have made it quite clear that they're not interested in negotiating. So even if the Ukrainians were willing to give up people, which is what land means, the Russians just want to run them into the ground. And they make this clear over and over again. So I don't really see why the suggestion for negotiation from our side would really make a lot of sense.
What do you imagine Putin's personal reaction is, having studied him the way you have, as he watches this unfold in Washington?
Yeah, I mean, the surprises for him are on the Ukrainian battlefield, where the Ukrainians have stopped essentially the Russian army. They've driven much of the Russian Black Sea Fleet out of its home ports. They've opened a commercial corridor for grain shipping. These are all surprises, bad surprises. The good surprises are how things are going in the United States, because we have no reason to be fatigued. The amount of money we're giving to Ukraine is a nickel on the Defense Department dollar. And of that nickel, about 4 cents actually stays in the U.S. anyway, right? So he's experiencing a good surprise, a positive surprise. In this sense, things are going better than he had hoped, sooner than he had hoped. His hope, his Hail Mary is Trump wins in 24. What he now is starting to dream of is that even by the late 2023, he's going to get some good news.
Professor Timothy Snyder, thank you very much for joining us again tonight.
Glad to.